Ch20 Neverseen. Keith glowered at the campfire in the boys' common room, keeping his back turned to all of his friends. I can't believe you went to face the Neverseen without me. And me, Fitz added. And me, Dex said. Both boys had very noticeably chosen beanbag chairs as far from Sophie and Biana as the room allowed. We didn't know that's what we were doing, Sophie said, holding out her arm so Della could smear ointment on a deep scratch. Kala only told us there were word whispers in the forest, and she needed us to leave right away. If it makes you feel any better, Bianca added, uncoiling the knot in her hair and looking way too good for someone who's just survived a showdown with their enemy. I'm pretty sure Kala only brought me because I happened to be there. It's a good thing you were, Sophie told her. You stopped me from making a ton of dangerous mistakes, and I never would have thought to throw my pendant at the force field. Warm spots colored Bianca's cheeks. I just remembered what Fitz's note had said about the smallest things being the most dangerous, and I thought, why not? Well, it was brilliant, Sophie said. You saved us, Bianca smiled. Anytime. Kif ruined the moment by grumbling, but you didn't learn anything. You had never seen right in front of you. You talked to him. I know, Sophie mumbled. I tried to trick him into telling me something, but he was too smart, and when I tried to probe his mind, I couldn't push through the force field. I bet we could have done it together, Fitz said. Maybe, Sophie admitted. I wish you could have been there. Me too. Don't run off like that again, okay? He asked. I'll try not to. Sophie hoped his small smile meant she'd been forgiven. And we did learn something super important, Bian added. The never-seen guy we met today went to Exilium. Does that mean he's the boy who disappeared? Fitz asked. It seems like it, Sophie said. And even if he isn't, now we might have a way to find out who he is. Already on it, Dex said, running toward his bedroom. He raced back a minute later, holding a Dexified importer, with wires jutting out the corners of the small silver square. I put all the stolen Exilium records on here, he said, twisting the wires and tapping the screen. We're looking for psionipaths, right? Sophie nodded. There can't be many of those, can there? You'd be surprised, Della said, treading a thin scratch on Biana's cheek. The talent can be unstable, like pyrokinesis. Not quite as dangerous, but it's one of the most common abilities among the banished. Well, we still know his age range and his special ability, Sophie said. That will have to narrow things down. And once we figure out who he is, we'll work on finding him, assuming the Black Swan hasn't caught him already. Dex frowned. Looks like there's 8 guys with that ability who were at Exilium at the right time, and none of them ever made it back to the lost cities. Great, so it's another dead end, Kif said, looking like he wanted to punch something. Sophie heard him mumble under his breath. He was right in front of them. She wished she could make him understand how much she'd wanted to learn something about his mom. Instead, she joined Fitz and Biana, who had gathered around Dex, studying the list of 8 Exilium psionipaths. None of the names looked familiar, and they were all banished for some variation of the same reason. Proven unstable and unfit for society. But surely there had to be something that would clue them in to which one of him was him. This, that does not look like an approved assignment, Mr. Forkel said, stomping into the room. Sophie was too happy he was still alive and safe to care about his grumbling. The rest of the collective filled in behind him, all equally unharmed. Her joy evaporated when Mr. Forkel said, all of Brackendale is an inferno of Everblaze. The Neverseen must have torched the area after he left. Do you think the tree will survive in its force field? Sophie asked. I suspect it was already gone, Kala said. I searched underground most carefully and couldn't find a single root. So that's it? Fitz asked. For the moment, Mr. Forkel said, collapsing into one of the empty beanbag boulders. We'll find a way to alert the council so they can extinguish the Everblaze. A loud thump turned everyone's head, and they spotted Keith shaking his fist. We echo your frustrations, Mr. Sensen, Mr. Forkel said, but punching walls is not the answer. Remember, Miss Foster has a photographic memory. He turned to Sophie. I'm going to need to see all of your memories of the tree. Sophie nodded, proud of herself for not fidgeting as he poked around her mind. She tried to feel his presence, but his telepathy was completely undetectable. The tree was healthy? He asked after several seconds. I thought that was strange too, Sophie said. I'd figure it was incubating the plague under the force field, but if that were true, the branches or leaves would have looked sickly, right? One would assume, Mr. Forkel said. So maybe they were incubating something else. Granite glanced at the other members of the collective before adding, it's possible the Neverseen could be working on a cure. That almost makes sense, Mr. Forkel admitted. If they develop a cure before the council, they could use it as leverage, much the same as if they'd managed to capture the alicorns in their previous attempts. But how can a tree be the cure? Dex asked. It could be a test subject, Blair suggested. Or it could be a panics. I'm not sure if I read that right, sorry. Kala breathed. For a second, Sophie thought Kala had said pancakes and found herself picturing a tree made of fluffy griddle cakes drizzled with syrup and butter. What's a panics? She asked. Nothing more than legend, Squall said. That is what many believe, Kala agreed. But I've never been convinced either way. There are so many songs, all telling the same story of the brave ones, the trees of healing that grew along the shores of the Eventide River during our years in Serenvale. Some say the trees were lost when the river ran dry and we were forced to flee our homeland. Others claim they never existed beyond the stories. And still others claim the panics thrive today, imprisoned behind the gates of Ravagog. The last myth has never been confirmed by any who visited the city. Mr. Forkel reminded her. Yes, but hasn't their access been severely limited? Kala asked. I'm not a fool. I know the possibilities are slim, but until I have proof either way, I will not completely abandon my hope. Do you know what the panics look like? Sophie asked. Only my imaginings, Kala said. Well, Mr. Forkel said, shattering the silence that followed. These are all certainly things we must investigate. But first, we have bigger issues. He rose from his bin bag, which required quite a lot of trashing and flailing, and moved to stand over Kala. Sorry, those are my dogs, sorry. You acted without orders. I did, Kala agreed, but I will not apologize. Sophie wasn't sure if she wanted to give Kala a high five or hide her from the furious collective. Kala, meanwhile, remained remarkably calm. Have you ever wondered why moonlarks do not bring their hatchlings back to their nests? What does that have to do with anything? Reid asked. Kala ignored his question. They leave their hatchlings alone because they know their young need to be strong. Moonlarks face more predators than most other creatures. So even though the parents follow their eggs across the ocean and are never far away from the babies, they do not make contact and they do not bring them to the nest. Their instincts know that if they did, they would shelter the younglings and weaken their abilities to survive. So, if I'm understanding you correctly, Granite said, you're implying we're overprotecting our moonlark? Have you put her or her friends to use since bringing her here? It's only been a few days, Squall argued, and we're giving them in that trading, Granite added. Plus, we'll be putting them in major danger when we rescue Prentice, Blur finished. Sophie wasn't sure she loved that emphasis on major danger, but she also knew Kala was right. The mission we went on today, she said, was no different than any of the other places you've sent me with your notes and clues. How many times have I almost died? All the more reason why we're taking only calculated risks, Mr. Forkel said. Which is what this was, Kala insisted. You've known me for centuries. You know that endangering Sophie or any of these children is the last thing I would ever do. But you also must accept the reality that sometimes we're going to need their help. Mr. Forkel walked to the fire and stared at the flames so long, Sophie felt twitchy. Perhaps you're right, he finally said. We have not been utilizing their talents to the full. And in light of today's developments, it's crucial we attempt to discern what the Neverseen are planning. So I think it's time we attempt Mr. Sensen's plan. My plan? Keith asked, looking as confused as Sophie. Surely the Black Swan weren't implying they were going to go barreling into Ravagog. But then she remembered that Keith had suggested another plan. One Mr. Forkel had even said had its merits. Mr. Forkel confirmed her suspicions when he said, Tomorrow the three of us will pay a visit to Getten.